Let's do a little experiment. Close your eyes and I will play an interval on guitar, and your task is to identify what interval was played. Ready? Eyes closed? Let's hear it. Got it? I will play it once more. What do you think? It was a major third. Okay? Did you get it right or not? Good. Let's try another one. This time I will play a descending interval. Eyes closed. Here it is. Once more. Do you know what it was? It was a perfect fifth interval. Did you get it right this time? Alright, enough of this. If you play guitar for a while, you might be familiar with this type of exercises. These are very popular among guitar players, and there are many apps that will train you to identify intervals, chords, scales, chord progressions, and so on. I used to practice these exercises every day in hopes that it will help me to improve my ear and to become a better musician. And sure, it helped a bit, but I never felt like it really had any big impact on my ear or my overall musicianship. And this was even when my success rate on those exercises was more than 90%. So in this video I want to share with you my thoughts on why this type of ear training might not be optimal if you want to become a guitar player with a good ear, and I will show you an alternative exercise that greatly helped me to improve my ear. But to do that we first need to examine what does it mean to have a good ear and what are we really trying to improve when we are doing ear training. I believe that when we say that somebody has a good ear, that usually means two things. First, that somebody is really good at identifying chord progressions and melodies. And the story usually goes like this. Somebody saw a musician that was able to play a song after hearing it only for a few seconds, or somebody was able to play a melody right away. Second meaning is that somebody can improvise a solo over chord progression or come up with a piece of music in an instant. So this type of good ear is not so much about recognizing melodies and chord progressions, but is more about hearing music and melodies inside your head that fit our chord progression that is being played and having the ability to put those musical ideas on the instrument. So one aspect of good ear is about recognizing and identifying what is being played, and the second is more about inner library of licks, riffs or melodies that can be heard internally and used when the opportunity arises. Of course, these are not some precise definitions, but I think it is important for our discussion about the good ear so we know what we are talking about. So if you want to train our ear, the goal would be ideally to improve both of these aspects of good ear at the same time. And this is why I think the exercises that focus on identifying intervals, chords and scales are not really that useful. They definitely don't improve the second aspect of a good ear. No matter how long you will identify isolated intervals, your inner library of musical ideas won't expand. Not that these exercises are intended to do that, but I think it is important to know about it when you decide what exercises to include into your practice routine and what results can you expect from them. Second problem with these ear training exercises is the one that was very frustrating for myself. Even though I had high scores in ear training apps, I never really felt like I was improving my ear when I wanted to learn songs and guitar solos by ear. I was better at identifying intervals and scales, but I was not better at identifying music. And I also hear this a lot from my guitar students. You want to hear what is guitar playing in a song, but you can't really hear that guitar because of vocals or some other instruments. And it is a very different thing when you listen to isolated intervals in a quiet room and when you listen to a song where 5 instruments played at the same time. I think that besides being able to identify intervals, you also need to develop a skill of filtering out all the instruments that you don't want to hear and focus only on what you need to hear. And this takes practice, and a lot of practice from my experience. So as I said before, training your ear with apps that can be helpful, but I think there are better options. There is an exercise that helped me to significantly improve my ability to identify and recognize things like chord scales and intervals, and also helped me to fill my inner library of musical ideas with fresh material that I can use for improvisation or composition. And I will show you that exercise in a minute, but first let me address one more thing that is usually not talked about when it comes to ear training or good ear. Having a good ear is not an absolute quality. I believe that I have quite a good ear for guitar related stuff, but not so much for low bass notes or wind instruments. I can hear when the guitar is just slightly out of tune, but my wife, who is a singer, has much more precise hearing when it comes to hearing vocals that are not in tune. The idea that I want to put forward is that you want to decide what kind of good ear do you want to have and then train for that. For example, I can identify a simple chord progression in a matter of seconds, but I know musicians who can do it instantly. And for me to be able to do that, I would need to train my ears for that specific thing, but I just don't see value for me personally in that. For me, the goal of a good ear is to be able to learn by ear any type of music that I want to learn, and I don't really care if it takes me a few seconds or a few minutes, as long as it doesn't take me a few hours. And the second goal of a good ear for me is to be able to come up with musical ideas that I like and enjoy playing. If I can do that, then I am okay with my level of hearing. And if I can write a guitar solo or piece of music that I like, which is my main goal, I don't really care what score would I have in an interval training app. So with that said, let me show you what I think is the best and only ear training exercise you will ever need. And you might have already guessed what that exercise is. It is learning all the musical materials that you need by ear. That is not very surprising, right? But I believe there is a specific way in which you want to do it to maximize the benefits for growth of your ear. If you want to get the best results, you need to go through 5 steps. And I will demonstrate these steps on a guitar solo that I wrote, but this can be used to figure out anything. I chose a guitar solo because those are usually easy to hear on a record and therefore are a good material for people who start with figuring out stuff by ear. So let's hear a bit of the solo. So step 1 is obviously to listen carefully to the solo. And in the case of a guitar solo, you want to listen to the whole first phrase or first musical statement. So in our example, it is this bit. Okay? You don't want to listen to just the first note or some random bit. Okay? You want to have a complete musical phrase. And you can listen once or a few times until you can hear that phrase in your head. And then you go to the step 2. And step 2 is to recreate that musical phrase in your mind or sing it out loud. And I know that many guitarists skip this step, but I believe it is very important and it really helps with feeding your brain with fresh musical ideas. If you have problem imagining the whole phrase in your head because it is too long, you need to chunk it up into small digestible pieces. And if it's too fast, you can slow it down. I use software called Transcribe for this. So if I listen to the first phrase again, my goal is to recreate it, okay? I can listen in my head, or I can try to recreate it with my voice. Sorry for that. Okay? So obviously the singing doesn't have to be perfect. It is just an outline to help you imagine that phrase in your head and to make sure that you hear it correctly, okay? So once you have a mental picture of that phrase in your head, go to the next step. And step 3 is to try and imagine where the notes would be on the fretboard without even touching the instrument. So you can hear that phrase in your head. Now you want to guess how the phrase is probably played. And this might be quite difficult in the beginning, but you can really get good at this if you stick with it. To make it easier for yourself, try to find the first note of the phrase on your guitar and then try to predict where the rest of the phrase is. And this is hard to demonstrate here for me because I played it solo and I know the fingering. But I might try to play it in a different octave. Okay, so I know it started on a note E, okay? So I can play it in different octave. Let's say I want to start here. So I have that phrase in my head. And so I think it's gonna go like this. I will start here. So it's second fret on the D string, and then I go fourth fret, second fret on the G string, then bend on the G string from 4 to 6. Then I will bend it up to the note D, and then I go 2-4 on a G string. Okay, so that's my prediction. And step number 4 is to test your prediction and find out if you were correct or not. So let's try it. Okay, great, I was correct. So this was not particularly a hard phrase, and in a different scenario I might have it wrong, but that doesn't matter, I got it right. So if you were correct, that's great. If not, imagine the phrase again and try to correct your fingering and test it again until you have all the right notes, okay? And once you know the correct fingering and the rhythm of the phrase, you go to the step 5, which is listening to the details, okay? So you want to pay attention to vibrato, bends, slides, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and everything that makes that phrase you wanted to learn sound good and so you can recreate it on your own instrument. Okay, so step 5 is all about listening to those small things that make a good phrase a good phrase. Okay, so that's it. Once you do all those 5 steps, you should have a phrase that you can imagine in your head and can play on your instrument. And this is a fantastic way how to connect what you hear in your head with your hand, or with what you can play. And one thing I want to add here is that some people like to write things down once they find out what is the phrase, and so they write it into tab or sheet music. But when I transcribe things for myself and not for my students, I usually don't write anything down. This is probably because I am lazy, but I also think that it forces my brain to remember those musical ideas a little bit better. And it also puts a natural limit on how much I can learn in any given session. So once my memory is full, I know I need to stop. And when I come the next day to the same solo and I don't remember some of those phrases, I just learn them again. And this might seem like a very inefficient way to learn something, but it forces me to listen to the same phrase over and over again until I remember it for good. So I would rather listen to the phrase again than read it from a piece of paper. But you can do whatever works for you. This works for me. And if you want to apply this same system to learning chord progressions, all you do is listen for the bass notes of the chords, try to imagine them, guess, test, and see if you were correct. If you want me to make a video on this topic, just let me know in the comment section. I believe that if the only ear training exercise you do is learning all your favorite music by ear, you will end up with a very good and musical ear. You'll be better at identifying melodies and chord progressions, your inner library of musical ideas will constantly expand, and the connection between what you hear and your hands will tighten up. Plus, you will listen to some great music. So, it's perfect. Alright, I hope you give this a try and let me know how it goes. As always, get after it. Thank you. Bye.